everybody. Welcome to the Soldiers of Cinema podcast. I'm Clark Coffey, and with me, as always, is Cullen McFader. Hey, Cullen.
Hello.
And we're here with our episode 12, covering the Masterclass lesson 13. And we're super excited to be here. This is going to be an interesting one. The topic of lesson 13 is working with actors, creating the character. And I think this one could be juicy. There could be some good stuff here. So I'm excited for this one in particular. I think it'll be fun. And to kick it off, right off the bat, Herzog jumps right into discussing the importance, the vital nature of casting for a project. And of course, I think this makes, pretty much common sense, right? Seems important.
Yeah.
But how important is it? Colin, you were just talking to me earlier about, like, if you added up all the, that people say, directing is like 80% casting.
Yeah.
And you were like, if you added up all those, like, cliched sayings,
it's like, it gets like 900%.
Right, like, directing is 80% casting, but then it's like 70%, script, and then it's like 90% leading, and... It is kind of funny. So, but it is clearly extremely important. I know that I've been part of projects where casting has been done well, and it was a great match. And not only did the output, like the actual story at the end, the film at the end, turn out well, but the process of making it was actually one that was joyful and fun. And then I've been on the other side of it, where the project didn't turn out so hot, and the making of it was not very fun either. So I've been on both sides of that, and probably most people, if you've done more than a couple things, you've experienced both sides of it as well. So definitely important. I don't even think there's anything controversial or special to say about that. So I think it's kind of like the next question is then, okay, well, it's super important. We agree. Well, how do you do it? Like, how do you cast?
Yeah. And there's so many different, good dynamics between, like, let's say you want good chemistry between your leads or whatever, and that can be found in so many different ways, which is kind of why it's a difficult thing to really nail down with, like, a simple answer. Right. Like, I remember when I, was doing acting, mostly stage acting, but I was in a play and where me and this girl, a good friend of mine, were the two leads for primarily most of the play. Like, it was really just a two-person show. There was a few other characters that came in every once in a while, but primarily it was us. And I remember feeling so great about that play because her and I had this, like, really, really great rapport, both on stage and off stage.
Oh, really?
Not maybe in the way that you would think. Yeah.
Hey, sorry.
This is a PG podcast. But no, like, things like, I knew, because our characters weren't supposed to like each other. They were supposed to be, like, kind of like a weird sexual tension between them, but they were really supposed to, like, really not like each other kind of thing. And I realized that if she was really angry at me in real life, she gave, like, an incleable performance. So I used to, like, eat her lunch and things like that.
Well, now that's interesting.
And just make her really angry.
Let me play a little devil's advocate. I get, like, kind of down a tangential, alleyway here. But that's interesting. So what you're talking about is kind of like, this can I'll just play devil's advocate. I don't want to be argumentative, but what you're talking about can really, I think, get you in trouble as an actor. If you kind of rely on whatever relationship that your characters are experiencing in the story, if you're kind of relying on your relationship to be that way in real life, on set, that could lead to some big problems. I know, some actors do this kind of stuff, and I think there's, an appropriate kind of manipulation that you might be able to do, right? Where it's like, if you're the main bad guy in a movie, you might not want to be chumming it up with, the rest of the actors. You might separate yourself a little bit. But, I think a lot of people run into some big problems doing that, right? I mean, how many times do you have the romantic leads in a story end up being romantically involved, and look at all the marriages and relationships that's destroyed. That hardly ever works out well. Or what's that story? Was it Jared Leto who
was sending things on the Batman
like used condoms or rats or something? I'm like, oh my god,
that stuff is bizarre to me.
I mean,
But
really,
the
it's acting, guys.
yeah,
It's called acting because it's not actually, you don't actually have to have these relationships in real life in order to portray this on screen
yeah,
or on stage. But but I guess what you're talking about though is that the chemistry between the two of you was worked on stage, and that's such an important part of casting, right? I mean, and like you say, it's so complicated because you've got, the individual look and feel and ability of the individual actor or actress that you've got in front of you, but then of course you're putting them together with other actors, and is that chemistry going to work out? It's extremely challenging.
yeah. And well, but even on the flip side of that too, there are some actors that have incredible on-screen rapport that don't like each other at all off-screen,
Sure.
that don't get along, and that and so that's why I think it's a really tough challenge to kind of narrow down like specific tips or the advice, even because there's so many different ways that you can
There
go about
is.
it.
I have a couple ideas though. I have a couple thoughts. You're right. So certainly, I'm not even going to pretend that you can kind of boil down or distill effective casting into some kind of like list of guidelines or something. You just can't. There is such an intuitive piece, right? That's like that would be like trying to explain how do you paint a good painting. I mean, it's like you could talk about techniques and you can talk about different types of canvas and paints and brushes and different subject matters, but you can't, that's just not something that can be taught. It is an art in and of itself. And I'm going to talk about casting directors in a second here because I do have a lot of respect for them, and I think good casting directors are really vital. But what I'm going
Yeah.
to say is, a couple simple things. I think, some of the things that I see in, especially in directors who are just starting out, they'll get a script, and the writer will have often all of these, like, the gender, the race, sometimes like height or weight, or all of these different kind of external qualities are baked into the script, right?
Well, yeah, which is always bizarre to me,
Right, and
but
that's exactly
yeah.
my point. And so, but I've seen this where, and then okay, so director gets script, or let me say, if the director wrote the script, right? They end up with the script, and it's got all of these external kind of qualifications for the character that actually really aren't necessary at all. It's
Yes.
really
Have nothing
rare.
to do with their
Right.
character.
It's
Yeah.
actually really rare. A lot of times, like gender, it doesn't actually matter to the story. Now, often, sometimes it does, but I mean, age often doesn't matter. So I,
I
I
mean,
see this so often where people will put themselves in a little bitty box for casting, and they end up focusing so much on these external qualities,
yeah.
and you're
Well,
really cutting yourself off from a lot of opportunity.
I remember a few years ago, not to get too far into writing because ultimately this is about acting, but I do remember a few years ago, right when I guess I was starting out, kind of stepping into the professional world. I think I just graduated high school, so this must have been five or so years ago. I was on one of those Facebook groups that does like screenwriting or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, and I posted a page from a screenplay for feedback, just sort of saying like,
Uh-oh.
"Hey, does this introduction make
Oh
sense?
no.
Is it easy to read?" And actually, to be fair, there was a lot of really good
Oh.
comments on there, and a lot of things that said like, "Hey, this is good, but here's what you can work on." Blah blah blah. But there was this one guy that was like, just took it and rewrote it in his own words to basically be like, "This is how it should be done," and it was all just exactly that. Like it was like your character description is not specific enough. Like you should have
Interesting.
come in and be 35. His hair should be at his shoulders. And I
Oh
was
my
like, well,
gosh.
that makes no difference for what the character is. But I also, for this feature that I'm working on right now, it's interesting that you mentioned gender because we actually so we wrote 3 drafts. There had been more than 3 drafts, but 3 total drafts, and there had been like 0.5s and 0.8 and whatever
Right.
within there. But 3 major drafts had been written, and on the 4th draft, we decided to switch the gender of the main character. And that was partially casting because we have someone in mind who we really want to play the main character, but it also, I wanted to see how it reverberated through the
Mm-hmm.
script about, if this character suddenly, because the script is, not to give too much away, but it's about a character arriving at their distant cousin's house out in the country and then having to deal with their roommates. And I thought it's a completely different situation if you're a man going there
Right.
versus a
Yeah.
woman. And sometimes it can provide a really interesting change. So I would say even then, leave it open. Like
You
always
can
be open
always you
to
can always
switching
do
those things
rewrites. Yeah,
around.
I mean you can
Yeah,
always
yeah.
adapt a script. I mean, and this is where I would even say, I mean, obviously, look, a script is vital, and we just joked a second ago about how if you added up all these percentages, filmmaking equals like 600% because it's the script is vital, the casting is vital,
Yeah.
and all this kind of stuff. But I really do think that there are a lot of aspects of a script that can be modified. These specific little circumstances that could
Hmm.
and should, I think, be modified to work around an extraordinary actor if they didn't fit kind of your preconceived notion of just these external qualifications, right? So I would absolutely, I'm completely happy to do that and often will.
Yeah.
I would so much rather have an actor that feels like they're a great fit, that brings so much to the table. And I mean, it's like maybe we can discuss that a little bit. I mean, I can talk about what I look for, when I'm casting, and let's jump in here too. Herzog doesn't really talk about this. Herzog jumps so far. He's like, look, it's the choosing the right actor is the end all be all. Understanding the hearts
Hmm.
of men and all these things. But look, let's be realistic. There are very real and significant practical logistical limitations or considerations to casting. And it's, I think, very rare that you can just absolutely pick just the best actor period without taking anything else to consideration. And you know I can give some examples. I mean, the horror film that we're working on now, we are in pre-production. We are currently fundraising, and we've achieved our first tier of fundraising. So it's like, okay, we're going to make the film, but now we're trying to stretch those goals. We're trying to achieve a higher budget. And so what we're doing is that we are reaching out, we're making offers contingent on budget to actors who have an audience, who have somewhat of a name in the horror genre, which is, where our film lies. And we're not auditioning these people. I've never worked with them before. I don't know what they're like on set. I can only see the work that they've done previously, right? But I don't even get a chance to meet them. I'm going to be working as co-director on this film, and I'm not even going to, it's like if they say yes, I'll accept, and we get this,
Yeah.
but right, then we can, and the whole point is that we can use their name to continue further our fundraising, hopefully raise more money, get a higher budget. What we do that, they're on board. And so I've got to take
Yeah.
whatever comes. And that happens a lot. And I think at a lot of levels of film, not just down here in these little bitty $250,000 or less films, but that's, casting is such a huge part of budget and marketing that those concessions are always being dealt with. So, and also just, right, the limitations of what you've got. I mean,
Hmm. Exactly.
right? You hold castings. It's like wherever your geographic location is, whatever the limitations of your budget, et cetera, your geography. I mean, you've got to pick from what you have available to you. So,
Well, I think, and I think a huge aspect of it is also people. I hear this question so often, which is like, what's the line you draw on collaboration?
mm,
And so like if an actor has an
great
idea,
question. Yeah.
where do you say, like, no, I'm the director, I make the final call versus what? But I think that the thing is, you can't really draw that line in your mind. The way I deal with it is, if it's a good suggestion, I go with
Yeah.
it, and if it's not, I don't. Right? Like
Sure.
I'm never really on set, especially when it comes to collaboration and the ideas that people bring. I'm never sitting there going like, no, 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 the actor can't make a suggestion for a shot because they're the actor. I would rather my actors not be thinking about that, but if they
For
do
sure.
suddenly
Right.
come up with something on the set and go like, hey, what if we try this? I'm not going to go, no, that's not your department. If it's a good suggestion, then I'm going to take it. I don't really draw those lines in my head of going like, no, 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 I've got to make this decision and leave it up to this department, and separating those departments, because I think that's a huge part of it, is that a really good team and we've talked about this in the directing episode, but I think it should go beyond just the director.
Mm-hmm.
A really good team on a film set should know every department. Obviously, not master it, because that would be a lot of time and a lot of effort put into doing so, but should understand the departments, because that allows so much communication
Certainly.
between department to
And of
department.
course, an actor having an understanding of how a set works, and certainly understanding, what's going on with the camera, with lenses, with other things. Having
Hmm.
like a general understanding of where your frame's going to be at certain focal lengths of lens, and other things. That's very handy. But yeah, like you said, I would much rather have my actor being concerned with their performance and their character as opposed to worrying about the technical, logistical issues of the goings on of the set. I will say
Hmm.
this though, it's because sometimes you can have this kind of happen. I've been in this place before. I agree with you that a director should be open to feedback, and I certainly believe that actors can have very great feedback, especially when it comes to the script and their character. If they're doing their homework, they're spending a tremendous amount of time breaking down and analyzing that script. But you do have to be careful that the desire to give feedback doesn't get in the way of them doing what's asked of them, though,
Hmm.
right? And it should be a very easy compromise where, if an actor comes to the director, say that's you, comes to you and has a suggestion for the character or something, it's I think you have kind of the obligation to take that and look at it. But you can say, no, I appreciate that, but let's do it as written. Now, if the actor is unwilling to do that, that's clearly an issue. So there's
Well,
a
but
line.
even Herzog talks about in the Vietnam movie about the prisoners
Oh,
of
the
war, where the guy, I can't remember
Christian
the specific names. It's the Christian
Christian
Bale
Bale,
movie, but
yeah,
it's the other actor who's trying to deliver a
yeah.
line and can't do it without either laughing or just
Oh, right,
sounding
right,
weird.
right. That
And so Herzog says, "No, no, let's take it out. Say it as you would say it."
right,
And then the actor just said, "Okay, I would just say,
right,
goodbye and good luck."
right.
And like it's things
It's a
like that I
collaboration
feel
for
like,
sure,
yeah,
but
so often directors are so stuck
can be.
on
Can
yeah.
be, and I think sometimes the less the experience, the more often that's the case. And I think
Hmm.
it's just because it's when you're new out there, it feels a little more threatening to
Yeah.
kind of improvise, quote unquote, so much on set. But I think as you gain experience, as you get more and more familiar with what's going on, I think you're more and more open and accepting of these kinds of gifts, let's call them, that can occur on set when you're shooting. But I just want to go back to. I mean, like we've really hammered home that it's an intuitive process that's difficult to create a bunch of guidelines on. But I mean, there are some things, right? It's like I think auditions are important. Um, auditions are a wacky thing. They really are a
Mm.
wacky thing.
Yeah.
I have been on both sides of this process so much, Colin. I'm not sure how much experience you have, but in the years that I was pursuing purely strictly acting, of course, as an actor, I was in auditions very, very regularly, and they often felt pretty, boy, pretty wacky, pretty useless, pretty sometimes even insulting, frankly. Because certainly there are some good ways to run auditions, and there are some not so great ways to run auditions.
Yeah.
But I do think audition process is important, and I don't I think regardless of what level your project is on, of course, if you already have a working relationship with people and personally actors, that's a great way, of course, and that's what you'll see. A lot of directors will work with the same actors over and over and over again, Herzog included with Kinski, because once you find somebody you work really well with, it's like generally you want to grab onto that. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but the audition process can be grueling, and I would say, one, kind of accept that it could take a long time, and build that into your pre-production. Don't shortchange the amount of time that you've got for casting, and even allowing yourself to have multiple sessions. And at every stage, right? You're going to have your initial set of castings or of auditions. You're going to bring people to callbacks. You're going to have chemistry reads. You're going to want to move people around and see how they interact in different combinations. Give yourself time and budget for that.
Hmm.
It really is important. And you'll be doing two things here, and both are vital. You're going to be giving a sense of what these people are like personally, what their character is like. Not their not their on-screen character, but their actual human character. And you'll
Yeah.
get a
Yeah.
sense of, like, do your personalities mesh? Do you seem to work well together? Do you enjoy being each other's company? Do they take feedback well? Do they have useful feedback for you? you'll get a sense of that, and you can't do that aside from spending time with people.
Yeah. And you don't always have to be friends either. I think
No,
that's a really
you
key thing, that
don't.
you don't always have to necessarily get along with these people, so long as your
Well,
relationship is
professionally,
efficient
I think
and
you
professional.
have to be able
Yeah.
to be cordial and right. I
Yeah.
mean, you have to have the
And
ability to
work. Yeah.
work well. But yeah, you don't have to be best buddies.
Like
Absolutely
I
not.
know very many people that I work with that I enjoy working with on a professional level that I would never hang out with
Yeah,
or get
sure.
a drink with or
Yeah,
whatever. And I think that that's kind of what's important, is that like you don't have to get along with these people in the way that
in
I
a
mean,
friendship way. You
yeah,
don't
in a
have to be
friendship way,
buddies.
exactly.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And some of the most like productive and fruitful collaborations I've had with people, I was also not buddies with. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But then some of but it has been the case conversely as well. So it's
Yep.
not that
Yep.
you can't be
Exactly.
friends with somebody and work well, but it doesn't have to be there. Um,
Yeah. And there are some people I've worked with that I would say have strained, stressful relationships with and stressful
yeah.
times on set where it actually turns out really well, though. I mean, and you look at,
Well,
not
Herzog and
to,
Kinski, my goodness,
yeah,
not to
Herzog and
not.
Kinski is a great example, and I was going to say Kubrick and a lot of even Shelley Duvall and The
Oh
Shining,
my.
where it was basically bullying
Well,
at
and
points.
and I want to talk about that. That's a great segue. That's a great segue
Yeah.
because, Herzog speaks to something that, I never want to put words in his mouth. And so
Hmm.
I'm not, I'll never know exactly to what extent he is suggesting this, but he talks about what's on screen is all that matters.
Hmm.
And I'm going to lean a little bit to the side that there's an understood thing going on here, which is that it's understood though that doesn't mean abusing people. That
Hmm.
doesn't, and yes, there are some pretty like mythically big stories of Herzog and Kinski in the past, and
Herzog trying to get him killed.
right, like I think Herzog even holding them at gunpoint, saying you can't, finish this film. I vaguely seem to remember reading that actually really didn't happen in that way, but certainly there's a lot of mythology around that. But I would
Hmm.
hope that at his age now, with his level of experience, I'm gonna guess that he's kind of there's an understood here, which is that yes, what goes on screen matters, but it's also vital that the process does not mean abusing people. And so
Hmm.
I definitely don't think. Now it's interesting. I don't know about you, Cullen. It was like when I was your age, I actually felt pretty differently. I cared a lot less about hurting people's feelings. I cared a lot less about how I treated people, and I really did kind of only care about the finished product. And I have really, really changed my tune on that as I've aged. Where do you
See,
sit on that?
I think that I think, honestly, it as cheesy as it sounds, positivity on set is like one of the most important ingredients,
And
simply because,
respect.
well, not only in respect and everything, but not only because of the actual working environment on the set of that shoot, but people aren't going to want to come back and work with you again if if they have a shitty time on your set, right? I mean, that's the bottom line, is that if I treat people like crap, and no matter how good the final
Yeah.
product is, unless I'm Stanley Kubrick, who got away with it because he was Stanley
Mhm.
Kubrick, people aren't going to want to come back and work with you. And I think people often romanticize that kind
I
of thing
think
too, is
sometimes
that they
too.
go like, I
Yes.
can be, I can be Gordon Ramsay, I can be yelling at people and shouting at people and
Because
all
it's
that, and
such a
all that
common
matters is that I'm
trope,
a
right?
brilliant.
It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
the crazy, creative guy, the demanding leader, the ruthless
Hmm.
kind of tyrant or dictator on set. The director
And
is a
it does
dictator.
sort of go back to what we talked about a few episodes ago too, where it was like Herzog was saying, with my actor Nicolas Cage, when he said, can we meet up for lunch or something,
Or he
and
wanted
Herzog
to.
said, no, we go
Yeah,
home,
he
we stay separate.
Cage
Whereas
wanted Herzog to stay
I
at his house. I think is what it was.
yeah,
Yeah.
whereas I'm very much the opposite. Like, I very happily will go out with cast and crew after a shoot
Sure.
for a drink, and I think that it's so important to have very open lines of communication there, and to and not only for what's on the screen, but just for even just the safety of people. Like, we've heard all these horror stories coming out of sets,
Absolutely.
especially over the past few years, where it's like, had you just had open lines of communication, so often would those things have not been able to occur.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
you make a great point, Cullen, that there's a logistical side and I'll just reiterate it because it's vital. How you treat people is going to have a profound impact on your ability to work in the future. And I don't care whatever role you're in, as you're an actor, if you're a director, if you're a DP, if you're, you know, anything, if you're a grip, I mean, it doesn't matter. How you treat people is important in the real world. It's a small industry. Even out here in LA, I cannot tell you how many times I see the same people, or how small the degrees of separation are between myself and other people. It's insane. It blows my mind. And this is one of the biggest markets in the industry anywhere in the world. And it's still really small. So that's a good practical aspect. But of course, not to get too preachy or anything, but my goodness, I mean, there's also a moral and ethical obligation here. I mean, it's just treating people with respect, being appropriately professional. That certainly doesn't mean you can't be friends with someone, but treating people with respect, and having a courteous, professional working environment, I think, is vital. And even more, I mean, just to get a tiny bit philosophical here, I think a lot of people believe that the means justify the ends, right? And that's kind of what you're saying when you say what matters is the only thing that matters is what's on screen, and that's basically just another way of saying the ends justify the means. And I actually don't believe that. I think it's the process of making a film, and the community that you create between the people that you're working with, and that collaboration. And then even when you're done with the film, and the community that film creates with its audience is vital. And I think that process, how you actually do that, so the means has just such a huge impact on.
Yes.
And to me, that's kind of where it's all at anyway. When I'm done with a film is when I actually don't care about it anymore. That's actually what, right? It's the process is all I care about.
No, I mean, I was actually just about to say that too, that I don't really enjoy premieres. Like, I don't really
right.
like
it's like you enjoy
stuff.
working,
I do it because, I like the process. I also, too, to just add on to that as well, I think it's the only situation where I think I would really agree with, all that matters is on screen is really the technicalities. Like, I don't care if the shot is lit by an iPhone or if the shot is lit by an airy, $10,000 light. But when it comes to relationships and I would say the working environment, no, I think it's hugely important.
And I think you can have both, right? You can do all,
absolutely.
And I would imagine, I'm going to go out on a limb here, not really, haha, but I'm going to imagine working on a Herzog set today's day and age is probably a profoundly respectful, courteous, professional, conducive environment. That's what I'm going to guess. And so I think, yes, what's on screen matters. The film is important, but you can do that. And I think you actually will even have better luck doing it if you treat everybody around you with respect and grace and patience.
Absolutely. And I'm going to go back to this kitchen analogy again, because I do sort of have very active, proof of this, which is that when you are I think that a lot of people look at negative enforcement as the most powerful type of enforcement, that if someone's not doing their job and I shout at them that they're gonna do their job,
break out the whip,
do it well. And again, that's why I kind of brought up this Gordon Ramsay type thing, where it's you've got this whole idea of whereas and sure, does he make great food? Absolutely. Do those people get their ass in gear when he screams at them? Sure. But I would never say this to Gordon Ramsay because he'd probably yell at me.
You.
But I would always be curious to know if he didn't do that. If someone made a mistake and not accepted the mistake, but went up to them and said, "Hey, what do you need? What do you need from me? How can I help?" Or even just saying "Nope, don't panic, just do it again," and that kind of thing. That would his kitchen run more efficiently? Would his workplace run more efficiently? Because I remember working when I was a bartender. And the bar manager before me was quite the Gordon Ramsay type kind of thing, where it's very, on the thing. And then when I started training people, I kind of took the opposite approach. And at least what I found, and this is very anecdotal, but what I found was that there were less mistakes, that people weren't stressed out, shaking a martini too long because they wanted to make sure that it was perfect. They were calm, and that was the whole point of what I was trying to do. Was if there's one thing I can say about myself is I'm quite good at staying calm,
Yeah, you
and I
seem to
think
be a
that's
pretty
what's really
calm dude.
important.
Yeah.
It's all of I just have a constant IV of THC oil in there. But no, really, I think that again, staying calm, and
You're
it's not to say
sedated.
that exactly all the time. That's why I carry around the big IV bag with me.
I
But
wondered that. Like when you came over to visit
yeah.
and you had that, like I picked you up at the airport. I'm like, what? No.
Yeah. No, but I think that again that's kind of, and that's not to say that I won't, reprimand someone, or on a set that I won't say to someone, hey, you're not doing your
Yeah.
job. But if someone makes an honest mistake and they're trying, there's no reason to get angry at them and to shout at them and to kind of, make them feel like crap.
Yeah.
Because I think that often that just makes a worse final product, because now they're freaking out
And you
about it
really
and
do.
they're stressed
Yeah,
out.
you really do bring up a great point. I mean, I think that it is just as likely to say, and we'll never know, but I agree with you on your hunch. But it's I think that it's very likely that a person like Gordon Ramsay is not successful because he treats people poorly. He's successful in spite of the fact that he treats people poorly. And it would be interesting to see how he treats people when he's not on camera and has to live
Well,
up to
yeah.
this, caricature that he plays.
Exactly.
When he's
And there's such a vast difference between the American and the British kitchen nightmares
Right.
in that way too. But not to get into
right.
Ramsay's podcast. That's
But
my
I want
other
to talk
podcast.
about, you mentioned you said something that kind of reminded me a little bit of another aspect of this question, or this the consideration. You talk about not treating people poorly as a means to get elicit different behavior, right? If they're slacking on set or not performing their job duties, you talk about negative versus positive. But something we haven't talked about too, and you mentioned Kubrick, and he did this, manipulating actors to try to elicit different performances. I think that there's a really strong, for me personally, I think that's a very dangerous area to get into, and I know that there are
Slippery slope.
there's a very slippery slope, and I think that there are examples of directors in the past who I think manipulate actors in unethical and inappropriate ways to elicit performances. And I would just on the record that I do not I don't want to be manipulated as an actor. I would not want to be manipulated in some kind of negative way. I think a director's job is to create a conducive environment for the actor to work. And going back to the importance of casting, hopefully you've cast someone who's able to give the kind of performance and emotional range that the story and character demands. So hopefully that's been done. If you're having to really manipulate in significant ways your actor, you might have not cast very well then. It's a very dangerous area there.
And when I say it's a slippery slope as well, I mean that there's so many different levels to it.
Right.
So for example, in Alien, when they were shooting Alien, Ridley Scott didn't tell the actors that the alien was going to
Right.
bust out of the chest, which I think is
That's
perfectly
I think that's
fine,
an
because then you're getting a
yeah,
genuine
that's an ethical,
reaction.
acceptable. I don't even call that a manipulation, really.
Yeah,
right?
it's more just it's a little, you're just leaving out information so you get a reaction.
Right.
Whereas a manipulation that I see as being both physically and emotionally dangerous would be something like on The Exorcist, when Friedkin told, I believe it was Linda Blair, that when she's ripped back, that they're not actually going to pull her back for the moment.
Yeah.
They're gonna cut before her pull back, and they're gonna swap her out with her stunt double.
Yeah.
And then didn't tell her, and
Did
then
it.
pulled her back, and she wound up,
Yeah.
having a huge neck injury because of it. It's
That's
something like that,
unacceptable.
where it's like that's
I
unacceptable.
think
Exactly.
that if you're lying to your cast, you probably are stepping into some not so great areas. That my personal.
Yeah.
If you can't be truthful, right? And I think there's a difference. Like you could, I don't know what Ridley Scott, of course, said, but I can imagine many ways where you could leave something a secret and say, "Hey guys, hey cast, you know the story, you've read the script. Something's going to happen here, but I don't want you guys to see it beforehand or know exactly when it's going to happen, because I really would like to have a spontaneous response that people can say, yeah, okay, sounds great. But to put somebody in a position where they're going to be physically manipulated in a violent way, like the example you just gave from The Exorcist, to lie to them, and then I just think that's so maybe that's a good guideline. If you're having to lie to people, that's probably, maybe you're getting into an area that at least I would personally not want to be in, not as an
Hmm.
actor or as a director.
Well, and again, it's to me, it's just about communication. So, like for example, I've had to film scenes where not full out fight scenes, but where characters get very physical with each
Hmm.
other, whether it's just like a push up against a wall or something like
Right.
that. And I would never go to the actor that's doing the pushing and say, "Okay, go really far with it. I
Right.
want to get this," and not tell the other actor. What I would do in that
Have
situation,
to have
if I want it
consent.
to be
You
really
have to
intense,
have
is
consent.
exactly is I go to the other actor who's getting pushed, and I would
How do you
say,
feel about this? If we
listen,
did, yeah.
how real can we go? How comfortable are you with going? And if you're not, then absolutely, say cut, or just
Right.
let me know or whatever. But what if we go, if you're actually shaking around a little bit, is that okay? And then that actor is now going to go, yeah, that's
They're in
fine.
control.
Or they may not say no, but most of the time they'll say, yeah, that's fine. Thanks for talking to me. Now we have
Yeah.
a open line of communication. I know that I can trust you, and that's a huge part of it. It's just this, that you're not breaking the trust of your actors.
Right. And I think you're right. And allowing them to be a part of the conversation, to give them the information to make conscious choices, to not present lies to them. I think these are all very good general guidelines for remaining, maintaining an ethical, moral relationship with your actors. But clearly
Yeah.
there are many examples. I hope it's happening less and less. But clearly there are many examples where that has not been the case in the past, and some very famous. And I think
Sometimes it's been fatal. I
sometimes
mean,
it
that's the thing.
absolutely, and it's been fatal before too.
Yeah.
And that's not even getting into the world of if there are simulated sex scenes or lovemaking
Oh God,
scenes or
yeah.
things like this. I mean, it's the amount of precaution that should be taken in those situations, and the level of consent at every single minute detail is vital.
Uh-huh. And I mean, that's the thing about those things too, is that like those scenes, if they're taken from a certain energy, can be a blast to shoot. It can be
Right.
hilarious, and you can have fun doing it,
Because
and you can
everybody's
make sure that
embarrassed
it's
anyway. It's like
yeah, and you can just kind of but it's this point where again where you lose the trust of your actors and you start to manipulate.
yeah.
That's kind of where, and again, it's like I love scaring people. I love pranks of like
Well,
hiding people's closets and
you
jumping out and stuff like
you
that.
are a little
And
scary
it's
though. I mean, it's
yeah, I
true
mean,
that you're calm. It's true that you're calm, Cullen. But I think it's behind that
a little bit
calmness,
Norman Bates, huh?
right? Because let's tie this in. Herzog talks about his role in Jack Reacher, and remember he's like the main bad guy, and he has
Mm-hmm.
that guy bite off.
The bite off the finger,
But
yeah.
Herzog specifically talks about in this lesson how it's like his performance. He's like, I come from a place of this power. There's no reason for me to be emotional. There's no reason for me to like yell or anything. So I'm just calm. And I feel like is that you, Cullen? Is that you come from
Yes.
such a place of just like you don't
A
even
man will
need.
bite off his finger.
Oh, I love it, man. I love it. I'm sorry. I think I interrupted you. You were gonna say, what were you? I don't even.
Oh no, I just that it's one of those things where it's like there are things like that I wouldn't mind doing to, or just to go back right to the beginning where it's like when I was I was never mean to my co-star
Mhm.
in that play. I was just doing things like if she had a brownie, I'd open the brownie and take a bite out of it or something like that, and it would just kind of get the energy there, and I would never intentionally hurt anybody or anything
No.
like that. And it's things like that where it's again and that's why I think it's both a slippery slope, but also something you have to draw really clear lines on.
And
Because if that ever went too far, then it's immediately something that has to be shut
oh
down.
my, yeah.
Whereas if even in let's go back to that alien anecdote where it's like if he didn't tell them that there was going to be the whole blood effect and all that, which again nobody was hurt, nothing like that. But if one of the actors came up and said, "Listen, I have a really weak heart, and I feel unsafe," or even just like my
Then you've got to
I'm
rethink it.
emotionally
You have
I'm
to
shocked,
rethink
then you've
it.
got to go, okay,
Yep.
they're valid in thinking that, and I've got to rethink what I
Yep.
did. But and that's why again it's so important to just know your actors,
I think
to just know
and get consent
what their
and get
yeah,
consent.
yeah.
And this kind of segues into another. We haven't touched on it yet, but Herzog mentions it in this lesson. We're talking about working with actors here. He talks about when he's, most of his cast, when he cast professional actors, experienced actors, he's fairly hands off as far as how, he's trusting, right, that these professionals And of course Herzog has worked with some extraordinary actors. I mean, he's been in a position for decades now where he can get high caliber actors. But when he works with a newer performer, a less experienced performer, let's say like Bruno S, for example, where he goes so far as to actually give an actor line readings. Bruno S, of course, is a very unique kind of situation as a human being, much less performer, and so. But extrapolate that though to just in general, giving line readings or how to give feedback. I don't know what your experience or thoughts are. I guess in a scenario where you've got a completely inexperienced actor, and of course, again, that is such a unique experience. I mean, Bruno was cast for the films he was in because of his unique personal experience being similar to the character's experience. But that's a very unique situation where this actual human being had experienced neglect and abuse and isolation, which mirrored the character. But I don't, there's not too many scenarios where I think I would have an inexperienced actor in a role. But I'm very much against line readings, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. All of this.
No, I've never. The closest I would say I've ever gotten to something like that would be, not necessarily say it like this, but kind of going like, if I'm talking to the actor about it, you kind of go like, and you kind of do the line out. But I would never say like do it exactly like that.
It's more of just. Colin.
I suppose it is, but I mean, I would never.
Like this is implied.
Yeah. But what I mean is more than like if I'm doing that, it's not on set.
I see.
It's during a conversation prior where I'm kind of going like, if they have a question to say like,
I see.
Is this delivered sort of, are you planning on this being delivered like this or like this? And I sort of go, well, in my mind, it kind of goes like this.
What I usually do, I have gotten into the habit, and, I will admit that sometimes this can be challenging because it can take so very long. But and sometimes it can be frustrating too. So you're always having to tailor how you do things with each individual personality, with each individual actor. But I'll often ask questions instead of trying to, I'll try to guide people toward their own understanding and interpretation by asking questions. And usually what I will focus on are the given circumstances in the story. And I will try to point actors to focusing on these given circumstances and help them come to a refined or different interpretation of those given circumstances on their own. So one of the pros of this, of course, is that you're never having to give line readings. You're not doing their job for them. You're eliciting and inviting their full interpretive artistic abilities. You're asking them to bring everything they possibly can to the table, but it can be extremely time consuming. And so generally it's, in rehearsal, this is a great, and I started doing this actually when I was directing theater. So I was working in a scenario where we had a lot of time in rehearsals, and I would even work with actors one-on-one outside of rehearsals where appropriate. But, film, you may not have this. Television, you definitely don't have this.
No.
It just does not exist. But there are variations on that theme. I mean, you can still include questions. You can still include pointing people to given circumstances and asking them to focus their interpretive abilities on that, as opposed to, I never try to focus on the performance, right? So I want you to do it like XYZ, right? Like louder, sadder, like definitely not that. But I mean, outcome is what I'm not trying to focus on. I don't want to try to tell the actor what type of output should be existing from their performance, but rather I'm trying to inform their process so that they get to their own output, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's just my 2 cents on it. But
no, exactly. I mean, that's what I mean when I say that it's not, to me, something that it's like, do it specifically like this.
Sure.
It's more of if they've got a question as to how, when it was written, if I wrote the script, how it was written, what's the tenor of that line, kind of how does it go? But I also very, very open to it. If that doesn't work for that actor, if that type of energy is like the antithesis to that person's delivery, then I'd be like, okay, well, how do you feel? How do you feel it going? And what do you think your character would,
Right.
or how do you think that line would be said in this context, or would they even say it? Would
And
it be
that's where
something that
I even
is
try not to focus
switched
on
around?
like lines for, I guess maybe this just comes from my experience as an actor, and not to get too far down this rabbit hole of a path. And maybe in another episode we can or talk about this
Mm-hmm.
more down the road. But I'm not worried about lines usually. I'm never
Mm-hmm.
worried.
Yeah,
I think
it's more the
I
idea.
remember when I was
Yeah.
like a brand new actor, and I would worry about intonation, and it's all about lines, and how do what I say the lines, and all these kind of things, and I couldn't be more far from that now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so focused on the given circumstances and these memories that are created of these given circumstances and taken as kind of real memories in your homework process, and then your emotional responses and reactions emanating from these memories that you've created for yourself, right? Given the
Mm-hmm.
circumstances in the script. So I'm always trying to point actors to the creation of these quote unquote memories from these given circumstances by helping them hone in on maybe things they hadn't seen in the script, or maybe they
Yes.
take an
Yeah.
interpretation in a direction that wasn't conducive to the story at this time. So I really try to work with actors in that way. But I mean, I honestly can't think of a time recently when I've been like, you're not saying the line right. You need to say it this
Oh
way.
no. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the only time that would ever really come up is if it's like so far off base. But even then, at that point, just reading the line back to the person's not going to
You got to
help.
break
You
it down. Yeah,
would
you're
have to
going
have
to
a
have to have.
conversation.
Yeah,
And
you're going to have to.
yeah.
And it's tough though. I mean, but because it's true, right? It's like if you're on a if depending on where you're at, you may not have time to do that. So just again, if this is where working with actors, finding a way to have rehearsal time, to develop a rapport, to get on the same page with their homework and your work as a director is so key. So key.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I mean, is that sometimes it's just quicker to change something
Yeah,
than to
can
or
be.
to allow the actors to experiment for just like 5 minutes, than to try and get that
Yeah,
line,
right.
down concrete exactly as it is. So I do think, yeah, there's a really important element to just like, the script isn't gospel. Be prepared
blueprint.
to, and as Herzog says, be prepared to throw out the script on set, which
Yeah.
I don't think I would do to that
Certainly
far,
not
but,
throw it
but
out
I do think that
completely,
the yeah, just in the trash. But no, I do think that there's a really important lesson there, which is just like, it's not, the script, the screenplays and movies are two different formats, and sometimes something works in one format that doesn't necessarily work in the
Right.
other.
They're a
So,
blueprint.
yeah,
I think they're a blueprint,
yeah,
and you can
exactly.
improvise a bit to some extent for sure. Well, we'll kind of like segue a little bit here as we wrap up this lesson. I think this is the kind of the major content of Herzog's lesson, but he does talk about a few other things here. He talks about physicality in performance, and example he uses is he talks about Nicolas Cage in Bad Lieutenant and how he worked with Cage on the physicality of his character. How Cage kind of, and I think we've talked about this actually in another lesson. I think he's brought this up actually a couple times here so far. But he talks about this kind of, the crooked posture that Cage adapts, and how he worked through that. Let's see. He talks about wardrobe and props, and he talks about Aguirre, and again, actually, and we've talked about this too before, the very similar physicality between those two characters. I think Herzog very much
Yes.
likes he likes
That
to
kind of
portray
limpy,
his,
almost, yeah.
his like crooked characters in a crooked way.
Yeah, very,
Make
very
it very
on the not on the nose, but very, bringing that physicality forward.
Yeah. It talks about the wardrobe and props. I think the wardrobe's actually amazing in Aguirre. I love how the armor rusts.
And we know how Herzog feels about wardrobe.
Let's see. What else? Let's see. He talks about finding a.
Well, I think
Yeah.
if I can just
Oh,
point
please,
on
please.
physicality real
Yeah.
quick, I do think that one of the things that I didn't steal from Herzog, but I stole from Kurosawa, which is similar, and they sort of say similar things about this, is that Kurosawa used to have his actors in character choose some sort of physical quirk or tick to carry through the whole movie. So if it was somebody wringing their hands, or that's that's very on the nose, but it could have been something as simple as someone has a twitch in their eye, or someone when they walk, one leg goes a little bit further than the other
Mm-hmm.
one, and things like that, where it's like just something that. And for Kurosawa, it was because when he grew up watching silent movies, it was an immediate way to recognize a
Sure.
character without necessarily seeing who they were
Sure.
up front. That you could see someone, you could tell who they were just by their silhouette,
Yeah.
etc. And I think that carries into a lot of what Herzog says, which is like, nowadays we have such amazingly high resolution cameras that you don't really need to worry about not being able to recognize a person on screen. But that just having that physicality blend in with their character choices can be such an
Sure.
incredible kind of way to identify characterization and
Well,
things
it's a
like
visual
that. And
medium, right? I mean,
yeah,
so why not take advantage of the visual? I'm all about density of storytelling. So,
yeah,
any chance you have an opportunity, and this is, and I want to tie this in with the importance of casting, right? Be looking for these kinds of things. I think
hmm
there's so much focus on lines, 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 lines. Do you have your lines memorized? Do you, how auditions, especially at, kind of more amateur levels for both the director and the actor, it's so much about lines. And
yes,
and I
yeah,
just want to say, really pay attention to an actor's physicality. See what they bring into the room when they audition. I think that you can often tell how much importance, or have they done homework on the physicality of this character. When the scene starts in the room, can you see them kind of change, right? Do you get a sense that they've now changed into this character? Did something happen? Make suggestions, give feedback in the room, and see if they can adapt new physicality right in the moment. I think that'll give you a good sense of if that's something that they're working on in their homework, they're cognizant of.
yeah,
So,
exactly.
and then Herzog talks about finding a character's voice, and this is something that, boy, you could talk about for an extremely long time. Um,
hmm
we've already hinted at it when I was joking about you speaking so calmly because you are coming from such a place of power. But Herzog does bring up his example of his role in Jack Reacher, and how he, chose to portray quietly that intensity of his character. I don't really have a ton more to add to that, except to say, of course, it's vital that a
Yeah.
character.
I mean, there's some great examples of Kurtz and Apocalypse Now and things like
Ah,
that, where it's not, you don't always need to blow up the screen to
you
provide
definitely
an
don't always
intense
need to
role.
blow up the screen. And I think, again,
hmm
just to kind of tie it back into the overall, center of what this lesson is about, is to definitely be looking at that as a director when you're casting.
Yeah.
Um, even if, and this is, I think, key, even if the actor has made, right, because most of the time, the actors are going to be coming in having worked off of sides, which are just a few pages. That's just a scene.
Yes.
More
Yeah.
often than not, well, more often than not, your actors are not going to have given the entire script. Now, I do want to make a comment about this, though. For me, I like to actually give the entire script to my actors before they audition. I know a lot of people don't do this, and in the industry, it's much more rare that you're going to get a script as opposed to just sides. But I
hmm
always give my auditioning actors the entire script because it tells me a few things. One, did they take the time to read the whole script? And I think that's important. It takes about, 45 minutes to an hour to read a 90 to
Yeah.
120 page script, give or
Not
take. And
long at
I'm not
all.
a
Yeah.
fast reader. So what was their investment? Did they take the time to do that? And two, it's going to, I mean, there's no reason not to give your actors all the tools that they might need to do as much homework as possible so that they can really bring something into the room to you. And so, as far as connecting this to finding a character's voice, really look to see what is the depth of the homework that an actor has done when they come in the room to audition. It'll give you an idea of their passion, or do they like are they involved, invested in your project? Did they connect with the script? Did they put enough work into, did they put the work in for the audition? I mean, it tells you a lot about an actor. So that's just, and a lot of people work different ways. That might not work for somebody else. But as an actor, I always appreciated the opportunities when I got the full script. And as a director, I always give the full script if it's even remotely possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
No, I agree completely. Yeah.
fantastic. Well, we will end on an agreement then.
Yes.
All
Yes.
right. Well,
Until I throw something in, but
yeah.
I'll sign it down.
Okay. Well, you've got a few seconds here as I wrap up. You can maybe disagree with me on something, and we can end on that if you so desire. But anyway, well, everybody out there listening, as always, we really appreciate it. We hope that you found this entertaining, enjoyable, informational. Enjoyable background music as you change the brakes on your truck in the garage, whatever the case may be. We hope that you've enjoyed it, and we will see you next time with episode 13, which is going to be a little bit of an extension of this one, working with actors on set. So I'm really looking forward to that one too. All these acting ones have like a special place in my heart because of all my experience as an actor. So I'm really looking forward to this one as well. But Cullen, thank you so much, as always, for being here.
Thank you. Yeah.
And everybody out there, we'll see you next time. Take care.
Bye-bye.